Hey, Chapel here, and today's video is going to be about the different playstyles seen in V-Rising PvP. The footage seen in today's video is going to be from people other than myself, to show some more variety in playstyles from what's usually seen on this channel. Now before anything else, I need to talk about one of the main things that you need to understand when getting started in V-Rising PvP, and that is the importance of cooldown management. Beyond the basics of just movement and hitting spells, the way you use your cooldown is the biggest way to gain advantages in fights. And the playstyle today is going to talk about the different ways that you can achieve that. Now this might sound like a strange comparison, but for anyone that's familiar with card games such as Hearthstone, you may have heard of deck archetypes being categorized as aggro, mid-range, control, and combo or one-shot builds. Now the same categorization can actually apply quite closely to V-Rising using the concept of cooldowns. In card games, the cards you have available are the different options that you can choose for any given situations. By looking at cooldowns in the same way, then you can have very similar logic applied in the way you play. Aggro archetypes is about taking the initiative and playing fast, always being the first person to make a move and force the other person to respond quickly. Control is the opposite of this, waiting for the other person to make a move first and playing as conservative as possible to always have an answer. Mid-range is about always having options available and trying to use them in ways that make sense. And finally, combos about saving options in a way where you can find a setup and win quickly in big bursts. I'll now go a bit more into each of these. An aggro style in V-Rising is also known as just W keying. This is all about staying in the opponent's face, and often synergizes well with physical and double defensive builds. While playing in this way, you can keep the pressure up constantly and not give the opponent any breathing room. This will usually result in fast fights and can be overwhelming for anyone who's not used to playing against this. From the players I know in EU, some of the people who play in this kind of way include Royin or Yumiko, Shark and Nilo. Yumiko records a lot of his PvP, so I've left a link for that down in the description if you want to see more. On the other end of the scale, you've got control players. Out of anything, this is easily the least seen style of play, and it's difficult to play competently because it involves a lot of patience and a lot of skill. It's not to be confused with just running away, because that's just a sign of poor competence in PvP. Simply running away in V-Rising is not a way to win fights, because you'll not be hitting dash cooldowns, which is one of the most valuable things in the kit. The way to effectively play control is about holding your ground and forcing the opponent to overextend. The main premise behind this style is using crossbow heavily in order to force the approach, usually comboed along with a ranged spell of some kind. If an opponent cannot match the crossbow play or find a way to approach, they can often die before even doing anything to you. The people who play this way most effectively typically come from a background of playing Battle Right, where playing range was a very similar fashion to this. The main players we see on EU who play in this way are Hot Biscuit and Pancake. There's also Ronan who plays this way very well. He made a lot of videos early on into Gloombot, and I'm sure he'll be back again in 1.0. Now to talk about mid-range. This is the way that for most players will make the most sense. This is about just using your cooldowns in the situations that feel correct, and usually handshaking them in the process. It's also a more loose term because you can certainly have more passive mid-range play and more aggressive mid-range play. Either extreme usually relating to how much you're pressuring in melee versus staying back and forcing the opponent's approach. With all of these being viable ways of playing, there is obviously also the option of just playing flexibly between them. Chipsa, whose gameplay I've had on during this video, is a brilliant example of this. He's been a strong player throughout Gloomrot, and I think a big part of this is because of how flexibly he plays. This comes from using both variety of spells and playing differently throughout the fight as it goes on. You can switch to playing control to force someone to get impatient, and on the other hand you can switch to being aggro to make them overwhelmed. Exclusively playing specific styles is perfectly viable, but playing flexibly between them can also be very threatening. Next, let's talk about the combo playstyle. A lot of the videos you might have seen previously on this channel can be categorized as combo builds. However, these can range between being incredibly aggro and being incredibly passive. For example, the Scholar build with Fears plays a much more mid-range style, focusing on safer gameplay as you look for combos. The Spider one-shot build, on the other hand, forces you to exhaust cooldowns in order to be able to get an in-cap to set up for spiders. Combo's all about dealing damage in big bursts, but it also means you get less opportunities to do that. In order to have cooldowns available for your combos, you have a few options. Firstly, taking Scholar Blood can increase your damage and give you the opportunity for cooldown resets, which is great when it comes to being able to have them available for your combos later. Secondly, you can intentionally take damage instead of using cooldowns in order to save them. And finally, you can place spells that have multiple charges in order to have as many available as possible. The third option is something seen by some of the other European players, such as Feet Fanatic and Petit Fleur. Feet will often play with Frostbats and Void together with Merc Charge. If a Merc Charge lands, he gets 2 Frostbats into Axii, 2 Voids and a Spear Q. Petit Fleur, on the other hand, uses Polarity Shift together with Void and Arctic Leap. These spells can apply constant pressure, and Arctic Leap is a very consistent combo ult. That's everything from me. All the players I've referenced, you can find links to their channels below if they have one. Any of the players I've mentioned that don't have a channel, you can also find them in the VARENA Discord. There's a link down below for that as well. I'd also like to give one more shout out to Grim, who's been cooking up some good V-Rising content lately. And if you're looking for a more broad view of how to play PvP, he made a really good video on that. Alright guys, have a good day. See ya!